All right.
Okay, great. And so good. Let me just do this, a little this. Great. Lovely. Okay. And this. Good. Okay. And just check my sound one more time. Let's see. Test, test.
Sounds good.
Okay. Test, test.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. And the lighting looks good.
Lighting's good. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then I'll check in a little bit before 8.
Before 8. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Joe.
Hey there.
Hey. So I just want to check my sound really quick.
All right.
And let's see. Test, test.
Sounds good.
Okay. And test, test.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. And the lighting's good?
Lighting's perfect.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. We will begin in just a few minutes. Thank you. I'll be right back. Yay! Yay! Hello, my name is John Fisher, and this is South Sea Bubble. The South Sea Bubble, the first great investment scam. I think WeWork, the housing bubble, Bernie Madoff, Enron, junk bonds, but all of this set in the year 1710. I discovered it one summer when I was working in New York. I was living there for the summer, and I got a job as a cashier in New York City at a bookstore. I was so excited. I wanted to work in a big old bookstore on Fifth Avenue, right? Because it's New York, it's the theater capital of the world, right? So they all have these huge sections of plays and history. That's my other subject. So I was so excited to get a job at a big bookstore on Fifth Avenue. I walked up and down Fifth Avenue one day interviewing for jobs. I went to Doubleday and Scribner's, and then I got one. I got a job at a bookstore, B. Dalton Bookstore on Fifth Avenue around 49th Street. It was great. And I had this idea that I'd be a cashier, but I really wouldn't do anything, right? I'd just like get plays out of the drama section, theater books out of the theater section, history books out of the history section, and I'd read books all day. And then once in a while, I'd like ring something up at the register. You know, I was wearing a tie. I was all set to sell stuff, but I really wouldn't have to do anything. I would just read books. Yay. That wasn't it at all. No, not at all. I mean, from 11 to 2, New Yorkers have lunch hour, you know, all these shifting lunch hours, and they just buy books. And there was like this huge line, I mean, stretching way off into the distance of people coming to buy books at B. Dalton. And they didn't buy the books that I liked. They didn't buy fiction or plays, theater, or history. They bought gift books, books about decorating and cats and self-help books, huge stacks of them, you know, like men who beat men and the men who love them, and women who beat women and the men who watch, and you know, the diet books, and how to lose 400 pounds in 3 days. And it was just these huge stacks of them. And I would just sit there all through this extended lunch hour from 11 to 2 like this, just typing things in and, you know, running things up and like running those credit cards. Remember that old machine that was me all day long? And cash. It was like all this cash and coins and money. It was like all this touching, all these cards. I mean, talk about a pandemic. I don't know why we were like sick constantly. It was just constant handing stuff off, and I couldn't even look up. The lines were so long. I was just like, all day was like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, bagging, thank you, thank you. And one day we had like a 10-minute break. I mean, I don't know why. It was just like this. Suddenly nobody came in. And the guy at the next register said to me, he said, you know, you just sold a huge stack of books to Tony Randall. I said, no, I didn't. He said, yeah, you did. The Odd Couple, that guy was here. He just, you know, he just bought a huge stack of books. I said, that's impossible. He said, no, you didn't even look up. You didn't notice. He said, go through your credit card receipts. You'll see his name. So I went through them. I said, his name's not here. He said, well, that's not his name. Tony Randall isn't his name. So the guy told me his real name. I went through my credit card receipts, and there was a receipt with his name on it. Leonard Rosenberg. I had sold this huge stack of books to Tony Randall, Leonard Rosenberg, and I didn't even know it because I was like, it was insane, that store. But the great thing was I did get to read a lot, because at night I would borrow plays from the theater section and I'd take them home with me. And every night I got a new play and I took it home with me and I read it on the subway. It was great. And then when I got back to my dorm room at NYU, it was in this tiny dorm room and it was sweltering hot, right? Because NYU dorms didn't have any air conditioning there. It was incredible. It was so hot in that dorm room. It was stifling that summer, but I was so in love with these plays, reading these plays every single night, new plays. And that's when I discovered Noel Coward, the master, Noel Coward. That's what he was known as. I loved him. Now you have to understand that this was at a time I was going to UC Berkeley, and everybody that I was going to school with, their favorite playwrights were Sam Shepard. And David Rabe. See, I don't want to be sexist. Who else did they like? Oh, Wendy Wasserstein. But I think nobody read Noel Coward. I love No Coward. I hated those other people, but I love No Coward. And I discovered my favorite play of his. It was called Present Laughter. You see, I also discovered how to read plays. Just imagine that I was playing the lead. That always helped. And I would read these wonderful plays by No Coward and dream of a day when maybe I could act in them. Maybe when I got back to UC Berkeley, they put these plays on. Yeah, I was so excited just reading these plays. And years later, when I actually started acting in Noel Coward plays, I discovered the greatest thing about them. The thing is in the plays, all you do is wear dressing gowns and pajamas. The entire cast is just sort of hanging out in dressing gowns and pajamas. And all they do is like lounge around on the sofa, right? And sip martinis and cocktails and brandy and sodas. And they just say clever things to each other. It's great. Oh, that incredible character who I eventually got to play, Gary Essendine, in Present Laughter. As far as I'm concerned, there's far too much talk about sex, too much nonsense. I enjoy it for what it's worth and fully intend to go on doing so long as anybody else is interested. And when the time comes that they're not, I shall be perfectly content to settle down with an apple and a good book. I love that play. It was incredible. I read it over and over again. I thought it was all about theater. I thought this is what real theater is like, these characters, these fun, dramatic characters. And I read another play by him, South Sea Bubble, the same night that I read Present Laughter. What a great play. And that's the first time I ever heard of South Sea Bubble. Now, this play is fascinating because not only was it dramatic on stage and very exciting, very sexy, it was very dramatic and exciting and sexy off stage. The original production is famous for all the drama that happened off stage. The original production starred Vivien Leigh, right? Scarlett O'Hara, remember her? Well, this is back at the time when movie stars, they had to prove themselves on stage because nobody thought that movie acting was real acting. They thought, you could do movie acting for money, but you had to prove yourself on stage. So she was always trying to prove herself on stage. At the time, she was married to Laurence Olivier, another movie actor who was always proving himself on stage. And South Sea Bubble by Noel Coward, starring Vivien Leigh, was a huge hit in the mid-50s. It was like a runaway hit. And then, in the middle of the run, Vivien Leigh became pregnant. Now, this was bad because she'd have to leave the show. So why? Why did she become pregnant? Well, she'd gotten pregnant by Laurence Olivier before, but it hadn't worked out. The child had miscarried. So she was insistent, determined to get pregnant again, even in the middle of this hit run show. Why? Well, there were rumors about Laurence Olivier, right? He had had sort of his artistic initiation in the play Private Lives, which was written by Noel Coward. Yeah, 25 years earlier. And that's where Laurence Olivier got sort of his artistic initiation. And Noel Coward was sort of a famous big old queen. He was just a gay guy. So people kind of wondered about Laurence Olivier. Also, it was rumored that he was carrying on a long-term relationship with Danny Kaye, which it turned out was absolutely true, and Vivien Leigh knew all about it. Additionally, Vivien Leigh, ever since she played Blanche Dubois in Streetcar Named Desire, had been kind of cuckoo. She'd been a little crazy. So she had to prove that her husband was straight, that she could give him a baby, and that she wasn't crazy. She could raise the kid. So she had to leave the play. Well, Noel Coward was livid. This was the biggest hit he'd had in years. He was going to lose all sorts of money. He was so angry. He was really frosty with those two. He would just not respond to them because he was so angry at what they were doing to him, destroying his hit play. But he did write some really nasty things to his friends. I am so happy for them, Sir Lawrence and Lady Vivien, although a tiny bit apprehensive on the Tot's account. To be born into such a turbulent menage might be a far from cozy experience for their Tot, what with Daddy shrieking fuck all over the place and bellowing Macbeth at all hours of the night and day, and Mummy going briskly round and round different bends and never less than 20 people to luncheon every day. So this is our first bubble, Vivien Leigh's pregnancy. It's a bubble that we'll come back to. Our next bubble is UC Berkeley, where I was in the drama department. I went back to UC Berkeley after New York. You see, International House, that's where I met my lovely husband. Still with him today. We met at Berkeley in the International House. Well, I was so excited when I got back from New York because I've been reading all these great plays, and I was so excited because I wanted to do like some great plays. I thought maybe even we'll do No Coward. So I got back, and it was, this was like super exciting, to be all jazzed up on theater like that. And I got back, and the first play I got cast in was by Feydeau. The next play I got cast in was by John Ford. And then I got cast in a play by Seneca. Seneca, the only Roman tragedian. Seneca was such a lousy playwright that he wasn't even performed in his own time. Yeah, Nero bumped him off before any of his plays could be performed. He was such a lousy playwright. He was terrible. It was horrible. Nobody ever does Seneca. So this play was called Thyestes, and I played Thyestes. And the plot was that my brother got angry at me. So he killed my kids, put them into a pie, and I had to eat the pie. At the climax of the play, I threw up, which is perfect because that's exactly how I felt about the play and the production. Fortunately, my husband said it was unintentionally gay. Yeah, he came and saw it. There were 12 boys on stage playing all the roles, and he said it was like an uber gay fest. It was like unintentionally gay. I was like, why can't I be in something intentionally gay? Why does it have to be a mistake? Seneca? Nobody does Seneca. I'm the only actor I've ever met who's done Seneca. So, back to our original bubble. In 1710, there was a world war. Now, in the United States, we think that there wasn't a world war until 1914, 1918, right? Because that's when we say it's the First World War, because in America, the United States, we can't believe that there's a war if we're not involved, right? Well, there wasn't any United States, so we don't consider anything that happened. But in 1710, there was a world war. It was a massive world war, and it was fought from Europe all over the planet. It was called the War of the Spanish Succession. And it was started by King Louis XIV, Louis XIV, the Sun King. Yeah, he's the one who started this thing. In 1710, it was off and running. Now, his big ally was Spain. Fighting against him were the British, and they had a bunch of little allies. Well, their big ally was the Empire, but they also had Hanover and Holland and things like that. So it was this massive conflict between the two sides. The War of the Spanish Succession. Now, Spain controlled all of South America, all of Central America, and the Caribbean, right? So the British realized that if they could end the war, they could economically exploit South America. How could they do this? Well, this is sort of the sad part of the story. This is the deeply tragic part of the story. How could they do this? With slave trade. They would go into the slave trade. So what the British would do is they would take a huge navy, and they would go to Africa, and they would kidnap people, grab people, take people out of Africa, take them to South America, Central America, and the Caribbean, and exploit the economic possibilities there with slaves. The slave trade, that was their solution. But how is this possible? The South Sea Company, that was the name of the company. The South Sea Company was going to raise money to make this happen. But it was impossible because they were in the middle of a war. They didn't control any of this territory. The Spanish, allies of the French, their enemies controlled all this. So it's like investing in another galaxy, in a completely different galaxy, in a completely different part of space, a place you don't even know about, a completely undiscovered galaxy. It's impossible. So we're going to take rockets to an undiscovered galaxy, take your investment money, and make something happen that's impossible. Why impossible? Why is this so impossible? Because there was this huge war going on, and the British had a great general. They had Marlborough, him with the big wig. Now, Marlborough, he had a very famous descendant. His name was Winston Churchill. Marlborough's real name was John Churchill, right? Okay, so he was John Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough. He had a very famous descendant, Winston Churchill, who, between being prime minister and various other things, was a great writer. So he wrote all of these incredible books about what a great general Marlborough was. And Marlborough was. Here's the thing, though. In the War of the Spanish Succession, The British were never going to win because the French were too big. They were too powerful. But the British were also never going to lose because their general, General Marlborough, was too good a general. He was brilliant. They could never win, but they could never lose. What was the key to Marlborough's success? Because he was brilliant. He was so brilliant on the battlefield. Okay, it was the same key that every other commander of allied nations has used. Work with your allies. Attack, 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 but never leave anything to chance. Rule number 1. Rule number 2, march your men until they drop, but always be supportive of them. Always take care of them, right? Always love your men. And finally, always appear with your army where you're not expected. Always surprise the enemy. And that's exactly what Marlborough did on the continent in his 4 big battles. He always appeared where the French didn't expect him. He always surprised them in his 4 big battles. At the Battle of Blenheim, at the Battle of Ramillies, at the Battle of Oudenarde, at the Battle of Malplaquet, Marlborough always appeared where he wasn't expected, and he always defeated the French and their allies. He was great. He was amazing. The problem is this war went on and on. It would not stop. It was the endless war. And now the British government was sinking because of this war. It was sinking. It was sinking badly. It was listing. It was sinking. It was 50 million pounds in debt. So along comes the South Sea Company. The South Sea Company tells the British government that it will assume all the debt of the British government. It will right the British government. All the British government has to do is give it a royal charter. A royal charter for what? The charter would be to sell stock in the South Sea Company, the slave trade, which was complete speculation. It was completely impossible because the British did not control South America, Central America, or the Caribbean, where all this economic exploitation was going to go on based on slavery, this horrible thing. They didn't even control the land. It was impossible. But it had a royal charter, and the public went insane. The scheme sounded good. It was endorsed by the Queen. It had the Queen's imprimatur, Queen Anne, and people became so enthusiastic. They started investing like crazy, but it made no sense. It was literally the world turned upside down. So now we're going to try this. This is very difficult on Zoom because there's so many wires connected to this thing. Oh my God, the world is turning upside down. Oh no, no. And it wasn't just the South Sea Company. The public was investment crazy. They would invest in anything. And all these other schemes popped up to take advantage of their investment craze. There was Puckle's machine gun. Okay, this was a machine gun that was designed to shoot round and square cannonballs. We don't have something like this even now. It's impossible. What were the round cannonballs for? Christians. What were the square ones for? Turks. It was a racist machine gun, and it was impossible to build. A device for making salt water fresh quickly. Another investment scam. Impossible. We still don't have it. A perpetually in motion wheel. We still don't have it. It's impossible. And this one, this last one is my favorite. It's my favorite. This company put out an ad asking for people to invest, offering investments, and this was the description. A company for carrying on an undertaking of great advantage, but no one to know what it is. No one to know what it is? It's ridiculous. They weren't even going to tell people what they're going to do with their money. And people went crazy. The guy who started that company made thousands of pounds, and then he absconded with it. It was horrifying. Investment craze. It didn't start here. It didn't start anywhere. It started there during the South Sea bubble. Once people had the investment craze, they could not be stopped. At the same time, in London, molly houses were on the rise. Now here's a new bubble. This is a whole new bubble. It is our final bubble. In 1533, a law was passed in England against buggery, which is basically an anti-homosexual law, right? And they started cracking down on people. Now, the problem was that people started talking about it. Buggery had been going on forever in England, but nobody talked about it. But that's always the problem, right? You know, the minute people start talking about stuff, you have to come up with a law about it, right? Yeah, okay. So in 1533, there's an anti-buggery law. You can be hung if you're caught as a homosexual, right? Death sentence, crackdowns, but time passes and people just decide to ignore stuff, like they do, like prostitution. They just sort of live with it. They don't crack down. It just sort of becomes part of the landscape, right? Now, eventually, things become so casual that we get Molly houses. Now, Molly was a term much like Mary. You know how gay guys are like, hey, Mary, Merry Christmas, Mary. Oh, shut up, Mary. Like that. Although Molly is a little more derisive. It's a little heavier. It's like the F word, I don't mean the 4-letter F word. I mean the 6-letter F word. It's like that one. And some gay guys use that word. It's a nasty word, but some gay guys use it kind of affectionately. That's what Molly was like. So now we have Molly houses opening up. Molly houses were places where a gay man could go to be gay. And yes, there was sex. There was sex in these places, but it wasn't just sex. There was also companionship. There was gossip, gay gossip. There was entertainment, of course. And what was entertainment? Then as now, it was drag. Lots and lots of drag. But it wasn't drag like we have, right? I mean, we have like female impersonators who sing songs and stuff. They lip sync. This was different. This wasn't like that. It wasn't a lot of lip syncing. Well, I mean, how could it be? Because, they didn't have Judy Garland. She hadn't been invented yet, right? And they didn't have like playback. So, lip syncing was impossible. So what was the entertainment? It was very specific. And they had incredible drag names for these entertainments. Everybody had a drag name. Here are a few. Gotta Mary, Hardwad Nan, Old Fish Hannah, Thumbs and Waist Jenny, Flying Horse Mole. Variations on Mary and Moll. They loved those names. So what were the shows? What were the drag shows? They were actually rituals. They would embrace rituals, things that people were familiar with. One of their favorites was the birth. So one of the drag queens would play the mother giving birth to the child, right? What she would actually give birth to, though, was a wooden baby, okay? A hard baby, a wooden baby, right? And then after the baby was born, she would swoon. Then the nursemaids would come in, also, men in drag, hardwired married, people like that. They would come running in and they would take the baby, they would baptize it, and then everybody would have like a big celebration, a bunch of food. So let's do it. Let's do it. Let's have a birthing. Let's reproduce a birthing in a Molly house. Okay, so I'm the mother, and we're gonna reproduce this birthing live on stage. Okay, so here we go. All right. Push. So that was a birthing in a Molly house. Now, if you want to see a much better version of what I just did, check out our current show, Alligator Mouth, Tadpole Ass. There is an amazing male birth in that thing. I mean, I've never seen such a good one. The umbilical cord is better. The baby bubble is better. And when it pops, it explodes. I don't want to give anything away. Check out our new show. You will see a male birth like no other. You'll think that men should be having, it's going to become a fashion. Men are going to start having babies because it's so much fun. So this all took place, all these Molly houses in the city, that part of London where, coincidentally or not so, the speculation was going on, exactly where the stocks were being sold. And don't tell me that those stockbrokers didn't get off work having sold all that weird stock and go down to a Molly house to celebrate their killing. Don't tell me. So, back in Berkeley, my Berkeley drama bubble was continuing. The second season I was there, I was cast in 2 George Bernard Shaw plays. A Shakespeare play, but not a good one. A Swedish radio play being put on stage for the first time. Bertolt Brecht's first play. And a play by the postmodernist, post-structuralist, post-everythingist novelist John Hawkes. It was a nightmare. Everything was a nightmare that I was acting in. It was terrible. Now, don't get me wrong. Look, I mean, George Bernard Shaw is a great playwright. He is. I've read everything that he's written. I've read it all, right? And I love it. But I've read it. I haven't watched it or acted in it. It is painful to watch in front of you. Go home and read it. He was like a novelist who didn't know how to write narration, right? Okay, and then Shakespeare's brilliant, obviously, but he wrote some real stinkers. And this play that I was in, a lot of you are going to be like, well, wait a minute, that's a great play. It's not a great play. It's a phony great play. Much Ado About Nothing. It's bad. It's bad. No, I don't care about Denzel and Kenneth. It's bad. It is boring. So, Berkeley's bubble was out of control for me. It was about to burst. It was horrible. So now we have a whole bunch of different bubbles, okay? On stage, we've got a whole bunch of different bubbles. So let's see what happens to our various bubbles. First of all, we have Vivien Leigh's bubble, her pregnancy. What were the motives for her pregnancy? Okay, well, as I said, hang on to Larry, but this was an even bigger emergency than you can imagine. At the time, Larry was filming his movie, The Prince and the Showgirl, with Marilyn Monroe. So Marilyn Monroe was in London, and Marilyn Monroe and Laurence Olivier were getting more publicity than Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier. And Vivien Leigh was terrified that he was going to take up with Marilyn Monroe, that she was going to become Laurence Olivier's girlfriend. Additionally, she had to prove that Laurence Olivier was straight. Remember all those rumors, Noel Coward and Danny Kaye, which turned out to be true. Also, she had to maintain her sanity. Additionally, and here's a fourth reason, and this will come up later, maybe she just wanted to get out of that play by Noel Coward. Maybe she just did not want to finish the run. Maybe she just wanted to get out. So she quits the play to have the baby. And the day after she quits, she has a miscarriage. Yeah. Well, very sad. She has the sympathy of the world. Heartbreaker. But someone like me wonders, was she ever pregnant? Was this in fact a false bubble that burst? Back to our original bubble, the South Sea Company, the South Sea bubble. So this South Sea scam was done with the complicity of the government. It had the Queen's charter, and it was later revealed that £1,250,000 had been paid in bribes to members of parliament, to politicians, to grease the wheels, to make this work. Robert Walpole, an incredible orator, railed against this scheme in Parliament. Mr. Speaker, if I may, Mr. Speaker, if you please, this scheme is diverting the genius of the nation from trade and industry. It holds out a dangerous lure for decoying the unwary to their ruin by a false prospect of gain, and to part with the gradual profits of their labor for imaginary wealth. So what about the war? What about the war? What happened to the war that was preventing all of this from happening, from moving forward, that made it such a fantasy, this war that would prevent them ever from exploiting South America, Central America, the Caribbean? The British had withdrawn from it. They signed the Treaty of Utrecht and got off the continent, stopped fighting the war. Well, Marlborough, their great general, was pissed. He was so angry because he was convinced he could win the war. So he came back to England in disgust. But, and people didn't know this at the time, two of the secret investors in this huge scam, two of them were Robert Walpole and Marlborough, the man who railed against it and the man who was disgusted by it. They were both early and big investors. They were hedging their bets. Everybody, because of all of this investing, became excited about the value of the stock. It was mania. It was stock mania, investment mania, and the stocks shot up. They originally were offered at 128 pounds a share. Suddenly, they were 300 pounds a share. Suddenly, they were 500 pounds a share. Suddenly, they were 1,050 pounds a share. And it was impossible because, okay, the war was over, but now they had sold so much stock, they could never possibly pay back. They couldn't pay dividends on all this stock. There was too much ownership. It was like the producers. It's like there was 50 million shares, 500%, 5,000%, 50,000% in this company. It was impossible that they could ever pay back. So what did they do? They tried to do a distraction. They got the government to crack down on all the other investment schemes. Remember those other things? The company that was going to do something, but they weren't going to tell you what? The square cannonballs for Turks. That salt water becomes drinking water, the wheel that never stops spinning. The government was bribed to shut down all of those other investment schemes, to call them criminal, unbelievable. And then guess what? With the little bubbles popping, what happened was it precipitated the selling of the South Sea Company stocks. Yes, because people were like, well, okay, the wheel can't roll forever, but if that's phony, then this thing about slaves going to South America, that must be phony. And on top of that, too many people own stock. I'm never going to get anything. I'm never going to get any dividends because everybody I know owns tons of stock. So if that's phony, this must be phony too. And people started selling off their South Sea Company stock desperately. By October 1721, the South Sea Company stock was worth 150 pounds a share. It was right back where it started at the very beginning. And thousands were ruined. There were suicides. The directors of the company were arrested, although it turned out that 462 members of parliament had been investors in this scam. It was a disaster. The government was teetering. How could it get control again? It was a financial mess, a financial avalanche. So the government stepped in to bring order. The savior, Robert Walpole. He was made prime minister. He became the first prime minister in English history to give him extraordinary powers so he could solve this financial problem, to bring financial stability back to Britain. And unbeknownst to most people, he had made a huge profit off of all this. He and the Duke of Marlborough, John Churchill, relative of Winston Churchill, had gotten out early. They sold their stocks when the market was high. They crashed the market. They sold their stocks when the stocks were worth 1,050 pounds a share. They got out, they crashed the market. The government had scammed its own people. The next bubble to burst was the Molly houses, and it happened shortly after the South Sea bubble. Were they related? We'll see. The most famous, the best loved Molly house was shut down. It was shut down by the police when they found out what was going on there. This was run by a woman named Margaret Clapp, also known as Mother Clapp. Yeah, that was her name, Mother Clapp. Mother Clapp's house had the usual rooms for sex, but they also performed marriages there. It was so sweet. And a lot of these marriages were like the birthing ceremony. Yeah, they were silly, but a lot of them were serious. Gay men who just wanted to get married. Some sort of ceremony, somewhere in London, somewhere in the world, they wanted to belong to each other. And when they were at Mother Clapp's, they could be married men. Forget about when they went outside, they couldn't even talk about it. But at Mother Clapp's, they could be husband and husband. It was wonderful. Mother Clap loved her homos. She loved them. And she looked after them. She nurtured them like a true mother. Unfortunately, the authorities managed to penetrate Mother Clap's Molly house. Oh, 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 oh. They did a thorough study, the police, a thorough study of the place for weeks. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, excuse me. No, no, don't mind me. Oh, no, I wouldn't like you to do that to me. Thank you. I'm a policeman. I'm a voyeur. I'm not a policeman. I just like to watch. Yes. Oh, you'll do that? Oh, well, that sounds wonderful. Yes, thank you. Yes, go ahead. Let me blow out my candle. Yes, thank you. Yeah, jolly good. Yeah. So, I mean, I always kind of wonder about these people, these policemen who like entrap. I mean, what is their interest in all this? I mean, they seem incredibly dedicated to their jobs, right? To be going into these places of ill repute and exploring ill repute and reporting so thoroughly, right? I think it's amazing. It's like George Michael. Remember him? Remember he got busted in that bathroom, the public restroom in Beverly Hills, right? And it was like, how did they bust him exactly? I mean, how'd they get away with that? I mean, a cop went up to him and somehow enticed him and then busted him because he responded to the cop. But, George Michael explained it succinctly. He said, well, what was I supposed to think? I mean, he came at me with his big boner. So 40 gay men were dragged out of that Molly house, out of Mother Clap's house, into court. They were pilloried, humiliated, thrown into jail. 3 of them were hung. Mother Clap lied. She lied for everybody. She said half the men who were arrested weren't even there. The other half didn't even know what it was. She just lied. These men had been caught. And she said, no, he wasn't there. He was pulled off the street, that one. That one was pulled off the street. And that one thought it was an ale house. And that one thought it was a restaurant. She lied, but it didn't work. And she was thrown into the stocks and abused for days. And then she was thrown into jail for 2 years. And now, after that, she disappears from history. Mother Clap. The mother of everybody's favorite Molly house. It was the end of the Molly houses. For 30 years, there wouldn't be any more. They would resurge again in the 1750s and go away and come back and go away. And it wasn't until 1975 that it finally became legal in England. And until then, all anybody had were these periodic Molly houses until they were shut down by the police, the overeager police. Was this a direct result of the South Sea bubble? Was it? Because it happened right after the South Sea bubble, was it? I think it must be. I think when people are frustrated that their economic world has collapsed, I think sometimes they want to blame other people, or they see other people having fun, or they hear about other people having fun and they want to crack down. They want to get revenge on somebody. They want somebody else to suffer. Why are you having a good time? Why are you enjoying yourself in that Molly house? Police, go get them. I think it's too coincidental that it happened right after the South Sea bubble. It was its own bubble. The Molly house burst. In Berkeley, it was my last semester. It was my last semester there. I was out of the I house. I was living in a house with my friend Jillian and Scott and some other people and Michael, my husband. And it was my last semester. And I auditioned for a play called Birth on a Hard Shoulder. Now, this was not a great play, but it was a really good play. And it was very topical. It was almost like it was about bubbles, because it was about Margaret Thatcher and how she was destroying England. And the title was the central metaphor for the play, Birth on a Hard Shoulder. The play begins with a woman having a stillborn baby on the hard shoulder of a road. That's what Margaret Thatcher was doing to England. She was having a stillborn baby, a dead baby. She was killing England. Even as it was being born, her government was going to destroy England, and not elegantly, but on the hard shoulder of a highway. It was a wonderful play for actors. I knew that it would work with the audience. And the director wanted me to audition for the lead. So I went and auditioned for the lead. He said, very good. He obviously loved what I did. I went home. He called me. He said, listen, there's this other role, a supporting role. Will you take that? I thought, oh God, this is my last semester. Finally, a good play. But I've got to have a great role. I called him back. I decided I would be positive. I said, listen, I would really love to play that lead. I would love to play that lead with you directing. That would be exciting. That would really float my boat. There was a slight hint in there that if I was offered the other role, I wouldn't take it. But it was slight. That was the deal I was making. I want to work with you on that lead role. He cast me. He cast me in that lead. Great. The next play I auditioned for was called Ion by Euripides. Now, it's not the best Euripidean tragedy. It's not. It's not Medea. It's not Hippolytus. It's not the Trojan women. It's not the Phoenician women. It's none of those things. It's Ion. Nobody's heard of it, but it's a good, solid play. It's a good play. And I was cast in the role of an old man who dominates the first scene, but then he disappears. So I went to the director and I said, you know, I'm just going to be off stage after that first scene. Would you give me the role of the king who comes on at the end? And then I'll have this great contrast. I'll be like this old man predicting the future, the soothsayer, the man who can see. At the end, I'll be the king, coming to make everything right, to put Greece back on track. I thought that would be great. And I said to her, I said the same thing I said to the other director. I said, I'd be so excited to work on these two roles with you. Again, the slight hint that I wouldn't be in it if I didn't get both parts. She said yes. And so I had another great role in another very good play. Not great, but a very good play. I was so happy. And both directors, they both said to me when the shows were over, how impressed they were with how hard I worked. My friend Jillian and I, we got so frustrated with the plays not being any good, you know, Phaedo and all this stuff. Yeah, we got so that we decided to put Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, that great American play by Edward Albee. We decided to put that play on in our own living room. I played George, she played Martha. We even drove in the car in character and beached it like they do, right? And went into the house, and that's when the play started. It was great fun. Also, there was a variety night. And nobody wanted to host the variety nights. Nobody wanted to host it. And because it was like boring. All you do is like walk out there and say, and this is the next act, and this is the next act. But I volunteered to host it. I got myself a tuxedo, right? I dyed my hair black, right? And I went out there and I turned every introduction into a stand-up routine. I was doing stand-up all night long, introducing all those people. So I had 4 great projects in my last semester. I stopped waiting around for a good play and a good role to come along. I just found the roles and made it happen. And in the department, I had a bit of a reputation. Yeah, I did. I was known as being bossy. I was known as being a prima donna, but people respected me. They respected my work because they saw that once I got myself into something I liked and had a substantial role, I had fun. They respected me. So the end of the semester came, and it was my final semester. It was graduation time, but I could only go to one ceremony. I had 2 ceremonies at once. I had the history department, that was one of my degrees, and the drama department. Now, the drama department for me had been like Montessori. It was like a whole bunch of stuff was put in front of me, and I was supposed to select what I liked. And some of it I had to find on my own, like Coward. And I didn't want to do Feydeau. I didn't want any more Ball. Ball, that was his play, that Bertolt Brecht's play written when he was 19. Seneca, I've been in Seneca. Anyway, I had to reject the things I didn't want. You know, so it had been a very much a Montessori experience by education and drama. But in history, I just learned. They had just taught me, and I'd been enraptured by my lecturers, by my teachers. So I decided to go to the history graduation. That would be my graduation from Berkeley, the history department. So it's interesting though. I mentioned along the way that Vivian Lee maybe just wanted to get out of doing the Coward play. She just wanted to leave the show. And I discovered something when I started doing Coward. It is tough. It reads great, but it is tough. If you have the right audience, people can have a lot of fun with it. But if you don't, it can just seem very strange because it's about usually very rich people being very frivolous, but it's not. There's like great depths there and great wells, and underneath it all, there's a lot of sort of gay energy that he couldn't talk about. He could only suggest, but it can be very tough with audiences. You have to work hard doing Coward because it's not the most accessible theater on stage. And maybe that's what Vivian Lee discovered. Maybe she just discovered that it was too hard to do in front of an audience. And she just, after a while, wanted out. That's a possibility. You know, David Thompson, the great writer about film, he has said that Noel Coward's greatest contribution wasn't his writing, wasn't his acting, wasn't the films he directed, but himself. His persona, which always suggested double meanings. There was what he said and how he said it, and there was always a sense underneath it of something else, that gay something. He couldn't talk about being gay. He could not talk about it, but everybody knew, and he could suggest it in the way he delivered his lines. David Thompson said that Noel Coward's greatest influence was on other actors, people like Cary Grant, Laurence Olivier, Jack Hawkins, Alec Guinness, people who communicated other things, a lot of them gay, the subtext, or sexuality, desire, lust. They communicated it because the code wouldn't let them do it. The production code, it wouldn't let them state these things, but they could communicate it. That's what David Thompson said. He said that that was Noel Coward's greatest contribution, the subtext, the double meaning. And it comes across in his plays. That's why they're so much fun to read. But maybe, like George Bernard Shaw, they're better to read than to perform. Hey, with a great audience, forget about it. They are wonderful. They are great. But maybe that is his greatest contribution. The double meaning, the wink in the eye. You see it when you watch Cary Grant. You see it in a movie like Bridge on the River Kwai, where Jack Hawkins and Alec Guinness are like, there's all sorts of weird stuff going on with them. You don't know what. And William Holden is so American. It's all on the surface. You see the difference, the Noel Coward influence. You know, I always think of him, and I think of the songs he composed, and those speak right to the heart. I think of all these people, Marlborough, Robert Walpole. Okay, they're sort of villains. Louis Quatorze, all those wonderful people in the Molly House. Mother Clapp, God love her. Vivian Lee, Laurence Olivier. All those people in the Berkeley drama department. Michael, who came and saw my awful play and said it was good because it was just gay. The people I acted with, like Jillian and Noel Coward, a god in the sky, huh? And I think of that song he wrote. I think of singing it to all of them. I'll see you again whenever spring breaks through again. Time may lie heavy between, but what has been is past forgetting. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm John Fisher, and this has been South Sea Bubble. And we have a bunch of other programs coming up. This week, we have our hit show, Alligator Mouth Tadpole Ass. This production is wonderful. If you get a chance to see this, please do. You can get tickets for it online at therhino.org. You can even buy tickets on Gold Star, the half-price ticket agency. It's a wonderful play. It's amazing. The performers are great. One of them is broadcasting from our space in the Castro, and the other one is in Kansas. So they're separate, but they're broadcasting together, and it is so intimate. It's amazing what they do. Quite aside from the pregnancy scene, it's all great. It plays tomorrow, Friday night at 8, Saturday at 8, and Sunday at 1 o'clock. And then you can buy a streaming edition that you can watch with your friends all the way through to midnight on Sunday. I'll be back next week with another Essential Service Project, ESP. Next week, I'll be performing Callisthenes for Christmas. Yes, Christmas is coming up. And there you can see in the background, the Christmas tree. So we're getting ready for Christmas here at our household, Michael's and mine, at 91 Central. And tomorrow I'll have a special, on Wednesday, I'll have a special Christmas episode, Callisthenes for Christmas. So it's a day earlier. It's on Wednesday as opposed to Thursday. We have our reading series on Tuesday night, the first Tuesday of every month. So check us out for all these free programs. And if you'd like to make a donation to our theater to support all these programs, you can do so by sending us a check. Send it directly to me at my COVID-19 workspace, John Fisher, Theater Rhinoceros, 91 Central Avenue, Suite number 102, San Francisco, California, 94117. Or you can make a donation online at our website, therhino.org. That's THERHINO.org. But more than anything, thank you for being such a terrific audience. It was terrific performing for you tonight. This adventure into bubbles, the South Sea Bubble. Good night.